Welcome back to the Bitcoin Magazine News Desk, powered by Mara. I'm Jeff Hepner. This is Timo Lamar. Down at the end is Sean Hagen, and today we are joined by Mr. Sean Owen from Salt Lending. Sean, welcome.
Hey, it's good to be here.
I'm glad you're here, man.
Absolutely.
Seeing Senator Lummis and the way she personifies the ethos of Bitcoin, I buy it. You know what I mean? I really buy it. I believe her, and I believe her sincerity at pushing not just the Clarity Act and her love of Bitcoin, but I feel like she really wants to spread it to everybody. And I think it's really important that we diversify, who we're talking to, right? Like Sean, just broadening the tent, not just finance guys and not just, crazy sovereign individuals, right? It's about bringing everybody in and showing them how this is going to affect their lives.
Yeah, 100%. And like the finance bros certainly were not here first, right? That was a big deal when they showed up a couple cycles ago. So yeah, look, I mean, we've heard about how it's cypherpunk money at its core and at its roots, and I think we're going to hear more about that today.
Yeah.
And you mentioning Senator Lummis and her story of getting into Bitcoin and how the traditional financial system did not serve her. And Bitcoin being that solution that nothing else can is incredibly important. And I think tells a story that people who have an idea about Bitcoin but haven't gone down the rabbit hole can actually latch on to.
Well, and they take for granted their access to banking. And when they start to hear stories where people have different avenues into Bitcoin because of their lack of access. And Sean, I'm sure that's something that you see a lot, right? You get a lot of people who traditionally can't find lending that are coming to seek your services.
That's definitely becoming less and less of a thing, but it was pretty interesting just to see even that was Eric Trump, I think, was the one who had really said that was what turned him on to that. And that's definitely a true reality, is that Bitcoin has been underserved, underbanked for quite some time, and that there was a whole period of time where we were all, assumed guilty until proven anything else. And that seems to be fading a lot away, and the more that we get clarity, the better off we are for that. But Loomis was the one that really, I think, came to the conclusion that we all do eventually, which is zero is the wrong number, and there's a much bigger risk to not having any Bitcoin, especially the whole topic of strategic Bitcoin reserves, which I think is one that hasn't been in the news cycle as much recently, but is just as relevant and prescient all the time. Because what is it to own Bitcoin? That is your reserve. That is your hope. That is your future. That is the savings account of what you value most. And once somebody realizes, which I think we all have, I'm late. I need some more of this, right?
Yeah.
And the first thing you do is start kind of about facing and heading towards where do I get more of this and what do I do? And then that leads you down eventually. Banking services become relevant. I think it's the quote I usually use is that only 33% of verified Bitcoin owners have borrowed or thought about doing anything else other than just saving it. So that's quite a steep curve, and that tells you 77% of the verified, which I think is a small number, is still just at phase one, right? And phase 2 and 3 will always come. So there's this learning journey that it feels like it's really great to see everybody on.
Well, and you touch on the learning journey, right? There's this danger of people all of a sudden coming to the realization they can borrow against this, and then they fall into this leverage trap. And so I'm assuming from your worldview, you understand the value of education, of what they're putting, what they're holding, and then what they're putting up to take money out, to lend against. And how do you go about educating people to do that safely?
So transparency and information disclosure is, of course, key. Like that's the principle number one. First principle is that you need to be informed before you can make consent of anything, really. But with finance, that's very important. And so just good information and disclosure, being transparent and doing the best you can, which again is one of the things I think we all love about Bitcoin, is that it has this global, decentral, transparent nature to it. And attempting to get additional, or let's say traditional finance to catch up to that's hard. But there's a path towards that. And so it starts with good information. It also is usually then something that you can look at and say, well, what are you really looking to serve? If you are looking for just long-term savings, which is what Bitcoin brings back to the equation, is that you don't actually need to be speculating, going down the risk curve and gambling as much as you think. If you are in something that captures and saves your value versus something that's a hot potato that you got to get into the trash can as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Right? So that education becomes easier once somebody just realizes, there's no give me money, I double. There's no you have to go throw this on black. It's just save first, and then actually then using credit for a life event becomes much easier because you're not looking to go lever or speculate You're looking just to use it as needed, which is really what credit should be. Plus, debt becomes not a bad word if you're thinking about it differently. If you're leveraging against an asset that exists, that's real, versus printing money to create a promise that cannot be repaid, like it's a different terminology. So we don't really have words for that. Credit, maybe digital credit is the right way to think about it, the way Saylor prescribes, but debt really is kind of a different meaning altogether. So,
And are you seeing some of your customers have that aha moment?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, absolutely.
I mean, that's got to be kind of exciting, right? Because part of this journey for people is that personal responsibility that Bitcoin requires. And all of a sudden you see them click. I get it. Because I had that, right? I had a moment where I'm like, oh, this all makes sense, because I thought it was magic internet money and I was just going to go, I was going to be rich, right? And all of a sudden you're like, wait, no, I understand the purpose of this. And then when you add those complexities, it's got to be satisfying to see that come to fruition.
I love seeing the individual sovereignty come from small family offices and the small families in general. You know, I think the strategic reserves at the personal level is where it starts. You know, it's amazing to see great companies coming along and sovereigns that are buying Bitcoin and putting it on a balance sheet. But it's also just one indicator of where we're heading, right? I think the better outcome is when you realize that there's millions and millions of Americans now that own Bitcoin and own crypto, and hopefully more Bitcoin than crypto.
Yeah.
But the ability to just watch that's real adoption, right? Don't pay attention to price. Think about just how are we making the system function better for us, for a better future, and the price will take care of itself.
You know, I'm going to come to you with this with Timo. He said strategic reserve twice, and that also came up yesterday, right? Did you hear Patrick Witt's comments on that? Do you have any feelings on that? Because I thought that was interesting because it's coming back into the news cycle.
I think like Sean mentioned, I think before we get excited about a government or central bank adopting Bitcoin, you have to take care of home and making sure the individual is having their own reserve. And if you take care of that, everything else is gravy. And so I think it's hard for me to get too excited about governments. Now, I will say that you'd probably rather have your government aligned with you incentive-wise. That's the game theory of Bitcoin, that people who don't necessarily see eye to eye on things can actually be pulling in the same direction if they have both adopted Bitcoin. And so money for enemies kind of comes into play with that sense. So it's hard to get excited personally about it, but I understand that it probably benefits the U.S. government actually having a crypto or Bitcoin reserve.
But you make an interesting point too, and I like that we're using the same terminology. There's a personal family reserve, and a governmental level, and those things, like you said, if they're pulling in the same direction, we can all get to that place that we're looking to go. I mean, Sean, you're young. Someday you're going to have a family. I think you said you wanted to have about 10 kids. You were looking forward to that.
12 would be better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you're going to need that personal family strategic reserve. How are you going to go about getting that?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think when you examine the financial vertical of your life, right, you want assets that are easy to lend against, and also you're looking at assets that you want to purchase when you're taking out credit from a lender, right? And I think that's the aha moment that Sean was actually touching on, right, is that unlike other collateral, perhaps, that might depreciate on a normative schedule, or over time there might be new supply of this, whether it's equipment being manufactured or gold being mined, it depreciates in value over the term of the note, typically, right? And so Bitcoin, in contrast to that, will actually likely go up in value as it's scarce and fixed and whatnot, as these properties as superior collateral. So I'm trying to position in a way where I can utilize leverage, but out of a position of strength. And the best possible asset for that is Bitcoin. So I think that's the true aha moment, is you don't just want to take out collateral to get Bitcoin sometimes, maybe via like STRC, for example, which works great, but sometimes you want to put your Bitcoin to work as well, depending on kind of the market cycle at the time and the position of kind of the macro environment. And I was talking to Sean before we went on camera, and I think it's an interesting use case that he's seeing some of his businesses, some of his small shops, actually use that Bitcoin as a way to refinancialize the idea of what their strategic reserve looks like by parking that Bitcoin with salt and then gaining some capital back to put towards their operations.